Jeff Boiler was a Marine Corps veteran and had experience in law enforcement. Jeff was also an avid outdoorsman who loved to go hiking, camping, and hunting in the wilderness. As Jeff was hiking one day in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon, he had an encounter with a strange and terrifying creature. And trust me, it's one you won't forget. Jeff's story was featured on a Season 1 episode of the Paranormal Witness TV show seen on the Sci-Fi Network. In today's episode, we will be looking into Jeff Boiler's chilling encounter with the legendary Sasquatch. It was the summer of 1996 in Oregon when Jeff Boiler took up employment in the Wasco County Sheriff's Office as a sheriff's deputy. Boiler was an ex-Marine who, after being discharged from the military, returned home to Oregon. Jeff had no job, so a good friend of his family, Albert Ronald, the sheriff of Wasco County, offered him a job as the sheriff's deputy. Jeff, who loved the outdoors, jumped at the chance. Excited to be working for a good friend, Jeff accepted the job. Jeff was a hard worker, and after about 8 months, Sheriff Ronald felt that he deserved a day off. It was a beautiful day, and Jeff decided that it seemed like a good day to take a hike in the nearby Cascade Mountains. Jeff climbed into his Ford pickup, driving down the dirt road towards the Cascades. It was about 5 when Jeff arrived at the edge of the Cascades. Leaving his pistol strapped to his hip in its holster, Jeff took off into the woods, leaving the pickup far behind him on the dirt road. As he was checking his surroundings, something off in the distance caught his eye. It looked like a human being walking downhill, right toward him. Jeff froze. This wasn't just any person, it was a towering figure, 10 feet tall, covered in fur, with a conical-shaped head. No visible neck, resembling an NFL linebacker on steroids. Jeff was stunned, staring for a long time at the figure, which stood just as still as he was. Jeff cocked his head, trying to get the sun from behind the creature so he could study its features, but something strange happened. "Just as I cocked my head, the thing mimicked me," Jeff said. That's when he knew he was dealing with something intelligent. "I was a Marine and a policeman," Jeff says. "I was worried my weapon would scare it. I unsnapped the keeper on my belt and moved the gun to my hip. When I looked back up, there was only 30 feet between us. And then it took off, and I lost sight of it." Curiosity took over Jeff. I had to find out what the hell that was, he thought. But there were no tracks, no scent, nothing. After about a quarter mile, he felt like he was being watched. Darkness was closing in fast, and Jeff didn't have a flashlight. He decided to head back to his truck. That's when he heard it. A noise like a big bang, really loud, something he hadn't heard since his Marine Corps days. Then he heard rustling noises off in the trees. Every time he moved, it moved. Every time he stopped, it stopped. Feeling paranoid, Jeff took off running as fast as he could, jumping over a fallen log, sliding under a vine, and going so fast that the wind was like a roar in his ears. He ran as far as he could, sliding to a halt, panting and sweating, thinking he had escaped, but then the crack came again. It was booming and caused Jeff to jump. The crack was closer this time. Jeff dashed off again, his body crying out for a break, just one moment to take a breath, but he knew, deep down inside, that there was no time. Jeff's heart was racing. As he got downhill, he saw a doe. Surprisingly, the doe wasn't scared of him, but then her nose twitched. She quickly turned her head towards the noise and bolted in the opposite direction. Jeff knew he had to get out of there. He ran as fast as he could towards his truck. The cracking noises followed him, getting within 10 feet. He didn't dare look back. If he wanted to make it out of this, to see his family again, he had to run. It was dark now, and the sun had completely disappeared behind the mountains. Jeff was running only by moonlight now. Jeff had just one thing to say at this point in his recollection. "I'm a United States Marine. I trained in boot camp for 16 weeks, fought in Desert Storm and Operation El Dorado," he said. "Not much scares me, but this scared me. I didn't know if I was gonna live to see another day." Shocked, Jeff jumped about 5 feet in the air when another crack resounded. This time it sounded like it was right next to him. It was so loud that Jeff involuntarily grabbed his ear, aching in pain as his ear rang. Turning to his left, Jeff took off, dashing into the opposite tree line from whence he came. His hiking boots were not suited for mad dashes through the deep wilderness, however, and soon he was caught up in a root, turning his ankle, rolling down a steep embankment, landing next to a rock a good 20 feet from where he had been. On the ridge above him stood the thing that had been chasing him. The sun had gone down, so it was now a bit easier to see what had been pursuing him without the sun's glare blinding him. The thing was stooped over on all fours, peering down on Jeff, its piercing eyes digging into his soul. He reached for his pistol but came back with nothing. He must have dropped his revolver when he slid down the embankment. Panting heavily, Jeff got up and took a turn to his right. He felt a small sense of relief as he noticed a blue trailhead marker, indicating that he was getting close to where he parked his truck. His celebration was cut short though, as another loud bang echoed across the forest, one last bang, but this time, it was in front of him. Turning his head in the direction of the sound, Jeff saw a tree, bent over, snap directly down the middle. The tree was about 6 inches across. Jeff thought to himself, if this thing could snap trees this big around, it could snap me in half too. Following the trailheads, Jeff picked up the pace of his mad dash, seeing the parking lot in the distance, his lonely pickup seeming to glare at him as he ran. Jeff reached his truck, fumbled with the keys, and finally got in. He made a 3 or 4 point turn and sped away. For the next 15 to 20 minutes, he wondered if his vehicle would be enough protection. Arriving at the ranger station, Jeff parked his truck, climbing out and dashing to the front door, banging on it with all of his might, looking over his shoulder the entire time. After a few seconds, the door opened, and Sheriff Ronald answered the door, his coat and hat on. He was just getting ready to leave, but seeing the look on Jeff's face, he stepped aside, allowing his deputy to enter. Jeff related his experience to his employer, in the back of his mind, thinking that he would be thought a fool, or maybe even fired. To his surprise, all Ronald did was nod and sip his coffee, listening to the entire story. When Jeff had finished, Sheriff Ronald stood up, moving to a nearby bookshelf, pulling out a manila folder. Reaching inside, he removed a few pages, paper-clipped together, handing them to Jeff. On the first page was a map of the Cascades, Jeff recalls. There were about 16 red Sharpie marks on the map, all clustered in an area the size of my fist. Sheriff Ronald told Jeff that all of the marks were times he had sighted the creature that Jeff had described, and that most of them seemed to be centered around the ruins of an old farmhouse on the top of the mountains. But the sheriff made it clear, don't write a report. Ranchers and farmers didn't want people going Sasquatch hunting and shooting cows instead. So there you have it, Jeff's chilling encounter with what he believes was Bigfoot. This concludes today's episode of the Paranormal Report. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel. It is due to your continued viewership and support that we are able to bring you interesting and informative videos like this. The team here at the Paranormal Report really appreciates your support.